The first rays of dawn filtered through the ancient stained glass windows of the great hall, usually painted the morning meal with a reassuring warmth. For Arthur Penhaligon, however, the familiar comfort of sizzling bacon and the cheerful chatter of his Hufflepuff housemates felt distant, a thin veil over a growing unease. He picked at a lukewarm scone, his gaze drawn, as it so often was, not to the intricate ceiling or the bustling tables, but to the distant, dark silhouette of the forbidden forest where it met the grounds. Specifically, to the looming presence that replaced the famed Whomping Willow, Kong of Hogwarts. The name itself was a whisper of ancient power, a primordial rumble echoing through the castle's very foundations. Unlike the Whomping Willow, a mere magical tree, Kong was a colossal ape, a creature of myth made flesh, magically bound to protect the castle. His fur, the color of twilight thunderclouds, often seemed to absorb the light around him, making his true size difficult to gauge until he moved. And when he moved, the very earth trembled. Arthur, a Muggle-born Hufflepuff, felt an innate, almost instinctive connection to the natural world. Growing up, his conservationist parents had taught him to observe, to listen to the whispers of the wild. That same quiet reverence had led him to excel in theoretical magical creature studies, a stark contrast to his clumsy attempts at practical spellwork. He often felt a sense of displacement, a half-formed bridge between two worlds, the mundane and the magical, never fully belonging to either. In the eyes of many, he was just Arthur, the shy, often overlooked Hufflepuff, easily forgotten in the shadow of more boisterous or magically gifted students. But when he watched Kong, he saw something else entirely, a kindred spirit, perhaps misunderstood and isolated. Lately, Kong had been more restless than usual. His low, resonant growls, usually a comforting, distant hum, now carried an edge of agitation. He'd torn down trees, not with the surgical precision of a guardian clearing a path, but with a frenzied, almost desperate force, leaving splintered trunks and churned earth in his wake. Students whispered of dark omens, of the ward's weakening, of an impending disaster. Professors, even the usually unflappable Minerva McGonagall, wore expressions of veiled concern. Arthur had spent countless hours observing Kong from the safety of his window, or from a discreet perch on the edge of the forbidden forest during his permitted creature study excursions. He saw the raw power, of course, the massive, muscled limbs, the fists that could shatter stone, the sheer scale of the beast. But he also saw something more. In the creature's deep, intelligent eyes, Arthur perceived a flicker of something akin to confusion, perhaps even fear. Kong's movements, once fluid and purposeful, were becoming jerky, almost erratic, like a vast engine struggling against an unseen impediment. This morning, the unease in the air was palpable. A thick, pearly mist clung to the grounds, muffling sounds, making the castle feel eerily quiet. Arthur shivered, though not from the chill. He had a potions class next, an hour of fumbling with cauldrons and potentially explosive ingredients, but his mind refused to focus. He just kept thinking of Kong. He finished his breakfast quickly, ignoring the faint scolding from a house elf for leaving half his toast, and slipped out of the great hall. Instead of heading to the dungeons, his feet carried him, almost subconsciously, towards the castle grounds, then further, skirting the forbidden forest. He knew he shouldn't be here, certainly not alone, but an irresistible pull urged him onward. He found a cluster of ancient oak trees, thick with moss and ivy, that offered both cover and a decent view of Kong's customary domain. The mist was still heavy here, swirling around the massive trunks like ghostly tendrils. Kong was there, a dark, hulking mass, barely visible through the fog. He wasn't moving, just standing utterly still, his head bowed, his shoulders hunched. It was an unusual posture for the usually vigilant guardian. Arthur felt a pang of profound sadness. "He looks lost," he murmured to himself, the words swallowed by the oppressive silence. He imagined how it must feel to be so powerful, yet seemingly so helpless. He knew that feeling all too well. A small, timid Hufflepuff with a mind full of ideas, but hands that couldn't quite grasp the wand work. Suddenly, a low groan rippled through the air, deeper than any sound Arthur had ever heard, a lament that seemed to vibrate in his very bones. It wasn't the usual warning growl. This was a sound of profound distress, raw and unbridled. The mist around Kong seemed to boil, swirling faster, thicker. Then Kong moved. It started subtly, a slight tremor in the ground, like a distant earthquake. Arthur braced himself, his heart hammering against his ribs. Kong raised his massive head, and through the thinning mist, Arthur saw his eyes. They glowed with an unsettling, furious red, not the protective amber they usually held. A guttural roar tore from Kong's chest, shattering the morning quiet, echoing off the distant mountains like a clap of thunder. The ground around Kong exploded. With a devastating, almost magical force, his colossal fists slammed into the earth, sending geysers of mud, rock, and splintered tree roots flying. The kinetic magic imbued in his fists wasn't just physical. It felt like a shockwave of raw, agitated power. Trees, ancient and mighty, twisted and snapped like twigs, flung aside as if by an invisible gale. The air crackled with expelled energy, the scent of ozone mixing with damp earth and ozone. Arthur watched, mesmerized by the terrifying spectacle, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He should run. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, to dive behind the nearest rock, to scramble back to the castle's perceived safety. But he couldn't tear his eyes away. There was a desperate, almost uncontrolled quality to Kong's rampage, a furious flailing against an unseen enemy. This wasn't the calm, calculated destruction of a guardian clearing a threat. This was agony made manifest. Another roar, this one laced with what sounded like pure, unadulterated rage, tore through the air. Kong slammed his fists together, and a wave of pure magical force ripped through the landscape, flattening a swathe of forest as if an invisible giant had scythed through it. Stones the size of small carriages were tossed aside, landing with sickening thuds. Arthur instinctively threw his arms over his head, shielding himself from the spray of debris, feeling the very air punch him in the chest. From the castle, shouts began to rise, frightened students, alarmed professors. He could hear the distant, urgent commands of staff trying to restore order, the faint sounds of defensive charms being cast. But they were too far, their magic too puny against this raw, elemental fury. Kong was now pacing, a whirlwind of destruction, his glowing red eyes scanning the perimeter with a frantic intensity. He seemed to be searching for something, or fighting something only he could perceive. His movements were jerky, uncoordinated, yet terrifyingly powerful. Arthur felt a deep, sickening lurch in his stomach. This wasn't right. Kong, for all his power, was meant to be a guardian, a protector. This mindless destruction, this desperate thrashing, spoke of pain, not purpose. As Kong spun, his gaze swept over Arthur's hiding place. For a terrifying, heart-stopping moment, their eyes met. Arthur froze, a deer caught in the headlights of a roaring beast. He saw the red, fiery fury, the raw magic pulsing within those depths. But beneath it, just for a split second, he also saw something else, a flicker of profound confusion, a deep, primal sadness. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, swallowed by the raging magic, but it solidified Arthur's conviction. This wasn't just a beast gone wild. Something was deeply, terribly wrong. The ground still trembled, the air still crackled with raw magic, and the shouts from the castle grew louder, more frantic. But Arthur, cowering behind the ancient oak, felt a strange calm settle over him. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his stomach, but it was overshadowed by a burgeoning sense of purpose. He, Arthur Penhaligon, the timid Hufflepuff who struggled to make a feather float, felt a powerful, undeniable urge. He had to understand. He had to help. He watched as Kong, with a final, earth-shattering roar that seemed to tear at the very fabric of the air, finally collapsed onto his haunches, his head once again bowed, the furious red glow in his eyes slowly fading, leaving behind an unsettling, dull amber. The destruction around him was immense, a scarred landscape where ancient trees once stood. Arthur's hand trembled as he reached for his wand, then thought better of it. What good would a Lumos charm do against that? No, this required more than simple magic. It required understanding. And he, Arthur Penhaligon, was going to find it. He would not let Kong be misunderstood, not again. He would not let the wizarding world mistake pain for malice. He would find out what was tormenting the Great Guardian, even if it meant risking everything. He just didn't know how or where to even begin. But he had to try. Arthur awoke with a start, the memory of Kong's roar echoing not in his ears, but in the hollow space beneath his ribs. The common room was quiet, the last embers in the hearth casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to twist into the shape of a massive, gnarled fist. He'd barely slept, his mind replaying the previous night's events, the crack of magic, the ground shuddering, the primal cry that was more plea than aggression. He knew what most students and even professors would see, a dangerous beast, out of control. But Arthur had seen the flicker of fear in those ancient eyes, the desperate thrashing of a creature pushed too far. He couldn't shake the feeling that Kong was misunderstood, that his destructive outbursts were a symptom, not the cause. The familiar fear, the sense of displacement he so often felt, began to morph into something else, a fierce, quiet resolve. If no one else would try to understand, then he would. His first thought, surprisingly, wasn't to consult a textbook, though he devoured several already, finding nothing that quite matched Kong's description. It was Professor Lyra Finch. The ancient runes and ancient beasts specialist was a legend in her own right, whispered about in hushed tones for her profound, almost esoteric knowledge. She rarely spoke above a murmur, her silvery hair often escaping its braid to frame a face etched with 1,000 quiet thoughts. If anyone could shed light on Kong's ancient magic, it would be her. Breakfast felt like an eternity. The great hall buzzed with chatter, dominated by variations of "Did you see Kong last night?" and "They ought to put a stop to it." Arthur picked at his porridge, the noise a dull drone against the frantic beat of his own heart. He spotted Professor Finch at the staff table, a delicate dragon-hide scroll unrolled beside her plate, her fingers tracing ancient symbols as she sipped her tea. Taking a deep breath, Arthur pushed away from the table, ignoring the curious glances, and made his way towards her. "Professor Finch," he began, his voice barely a whisper, thick with uncharacteristic boldness. She looked up, her startlingly blue eyes, usually distant, focusing on him with an intensity that made him feel as though she was seeing right through him. "Arthur Penhaligon, isn't it? Hufflepuff. You have a quiet way about you. And a deep current, I perceive." Arthur felt a blush creep up his neck. "Yes, Professor. I wanted to ask you about Kong." Her lips, usually set in a faint, knowing smile, tightened fractionally. A weighty subject for a young mind. "Come, let's find somewhere quieter." She led him out of the great hall and down a less trafficked corridor, eventually ushering him into her office, a room that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Bookshelves laden with ancient tomes reached to the impossibly high ceiling, scrolls hung like tapestries, and strange, glowing artifacts hummed softly on pedestals. The air itself felt heavy with forgotten magic. "Sit," she invited, gesturing to a plush, magically self-dusting armchair. She settled behind a sprawling desk carved from what looked like petrified wood, her gaze unwavering. "Tell me, Arthur, what do you truly wish to know about Kong?" "Everyone says he's just a monster," Arthur blurted out, the words tumbling out faster than he intended. "But last night, I saw him, Professor. It wasn't just anger. It was fear. And desperation. Like he was trying to tell us something, but couldn't." Professor Finch leaned forward, a flicker of something akin to approval in her eyes. "An astute observation, Arthur. Most see only the surface. Kong is indeed no mere beast. He is an ancient guardian, woven into the very fabric of Hogwarts by primordial wards established by the founders themselves." Arthur's eyes widened. "Woven? What does that mean?" "It means his life force, his very being, is tethered to this castle," she explained, her voice a soft, rhythmic hum. "He is, in essence, a living extension of Hogwarts' defenses. His immense kinetic magic, that devastating force you witnessed last night, is not his own in the way a dragon breathes fire. It is drawn from the wards, channeled through him to smash perceived threats. He is the roar, the physical manifestation of the school's defiance. So, his rampage, it was protection? Arthur whispered, the pieces clicking into place. In a way. But his protective instincts are usually precise, surgical. These recent erratic bursts, they suggest a deeper disquiet. A strain on the bond, perhaps. Or, more disturbingly, a deliberate interference with the wards that anchor him. Finch's gaze sharpened. These wards are not just magical lines in the earth, Arthur. They are ancient, primal, rooted in the very soul of the land Hogwarts stands upon. To meddle with them is to tamper with a fundamental force. A chill ran down Arthur's spine. But why would anyone do that? Before Finch could answer, a loud rap echoed from the door. Lyra? Are you in there? Albus said you were holding court. The voice was jovial, booming, and entirely out of place in Finch's serene sanctuary. She sighed almost imperceptibly, a hint of weariness in her expression. Come in, Alistair. The door swung open to reveal a man of imposing stature, impeccably dressed in ministry robes, with a neatly trimmed beard and an air of self-importance that seemed to precede him. This was Alistair Grimshaw, a high-ranking official from the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. He took in Arthur with a dismissive glance before fixing his attention on Professor Finch. Albus told me you might be indulging in some fanciful theories about our giant friend, Grimshaw said, his tone dripping with patronizing amusement. No offense, Lyra, but we simply don't have time for ancient superstitions. The creature is a menace. My department has received dozens of complaints from nearby Muggle villages, not to mention the structural damage to the castle itself. Kong is not a creature, Alistair, Finch said, her voice unusually firm. He is a guardian. And his behavior is anomalous, suggesting external influence. Grimshaw scoffed. External influence? Perhaps he's just grown too accustomed to unchecked freedom. No, Lyra, the ministry has decided. We need to take a firm hand. I've put together a specialized team. We're going to tame him. The word hung in the air, a blunt instrument wielded against the delicate understanding Arthur had just begun to grasp. Tame. As if Kong were a runaway niffler, not an ancient, magically bound protector. Tame him. Arthur couldn't help but interject, his timidity momentarily overridden by a surge of indignation. He's not a wild animal to be broken. He's protecting Hogwarts. Grimshaw finally turned his full attention to Arthur, a sneer playing on his lips. And who, precisely, are you, young man? A first year, perhaps, with an overactive imagination? This is not a conversation for children. Arthur Penhaligon is a student with a keen sense of observation, Alistair, Finch stated, her blue eyes colder than Arthur had ever seen them. And he is right. Kong is intrinsically linked to this school. Any attempt to tame him through conventional means, or worse, through suppression, could have catastrophic consequences for the wards. Nonsense. Grimshaw waved a dismissive hand. The wards are old, yes, but robust. A few stunners, some binding charms, perhaps a powerful confundus or two, just to make him amenable. We'll simply remind him who's in charge. We'll show him who the true guardians of the wizarding world are. He puffed out his chest, radiating self-importance. I've already had my team scout the Forbidden Forest, identifying key positions. We'll begin our operations at first light tomorrow. There's no time to waste debating ancient lore when the safety of the students is at stake. He turned to leave, a triumphant smirk on his face, but paused at the door. Oh, and Lyra? Try not to fill the boy's head with too many fanciful notions. Practicality, that's what's needed now. The ministry's approach is tried and true. With a final, condescending nod to both of them, he swept out, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Arthur felt a tremor of fury, cold and sharp, replace his earlier apprehension. Grimshaw saw Kong as a problem, a force to be subjugated. He saw only danger, not distress. He would break Kong, not understand him. And if Finch was right, breaking Kong could mean breaking Hogwarts itself. Professor, Arthur began, his voice barely steady. He can't do that. It's wrong. And it's dangerous. Finch watched the closed door for a moment, then turned back to Arthur, her gaze searching. Indeed, Arthur. It is profoundly dangerous. Grimshaw's methods are crude, designed for control, not understanding. They will not merely tame Kong. They will antagonize him. They will exploit the wards, rather than strengthen them. And if those ancient magical tethers unravel... She didn't finish the sentence, but the unspoken implication hung heavy in the air. She picked up a small, intricately carved wooden bird from her desk, tracing its contours with a thoughtful finger. The bond between Kong and Hogwarts is ancient, Arthur. It speaks to a time before our current understanding of magic, a time when guardians were chosen, not created. A time of balance. Grimshaw seeks only power and control. He is tampering with forces he cannot comprehend. Arthur felt the weight of her words, a sudden, immense burden settling upon his shoulders. He was a timid Hufflepuff, struggling with practical magic, often overlooked. What could he do against a ministry official and his specialized team? Finch's blue eyes met his, and a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "Sometimes, Arthur," she said, her voice soft but resonant, "the quietest observer sees the deepest truth. Sometimes, the one who feels the most displaced is the one who finds their true place by standing up for what is right." She paused, then looked towards a distant, high shelf, where a dusty, leather-bound tome seemed to glow faintly. "Grimshaw's methods began at first light, you said. That leaves precious little time to seek an alternative. But perhaps, a different path exists. A path not of force, but of connection. A path that seeks to mend, not to break." Arthur looked at her, then back at the door where Grimshaw had vanished. The ministry official believed he was acting in Hogwarts' best interest, but his actions, Arthur now understood, were leading them all towards disaster. He wasn't just worried about Kong anymore. He was worried about Hogwarts. And suddenly, he knew, with a certainty that banished all his fear, that he couldn't stand by and watch. Grimshaw's taming would start at dawn, and Arthur had no idea how to stop it, only that he had to try. The chill of the autumn night seemed to cling to Arthur, even within the relative warmth of the Hufflepuff common room. He paced, the rhythmic creak of the floorboards beneath his worn shoes a counterpoint to the turmoil in his mind. Professor Finch's words about Kong's ancient bond, about the danger of Grimshaw's interference, echoed in his ears. He glanced at the ancient tapestry depicting badgers frolicking in a sun-drenched meadow, feeling anything but calm. Still wound tighter than a Niffler's purse after a Gringotts raid, Penhaligon? Arthur jumped, spinning to see Lyra Thorne leaning casually against the common room entrance, a sheaf of parchment tucked under her arm. Her dark hair, usually meticulously braided, had a few strands escaping, hinting at a long night in the library. He hadn't even realized she'd come to find him. "Lyra. I couldn't sleep. It's Kong. And Grimshaw. Professor Finch thinks he's doing more than just taming him. She thinks he's weakening the ancient wards, but she couldn't say how. She just knows it's dangerous." Lyra raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Weakening ancient wards? Sounds a bit dramatic, even for Grimshaw. He's ambitious, yes, but not a raving lunatic trying to unravel the foundations of the school. Surely, he just wants to tranquilize the beast and take credit." "But you saw Kong," Arthur insisted, his voice hushed. "He's not just angry. He's confused, distressed. It's like he's trying to break free from something he can't see. And Professor Finch said the ancient wards are practically Kong's lifeblood. If Grimshaw's interfering, it could be why Kong is acting so erratic." Lyra pushed off the wall, a thoughtful frown creasing her brow. All right. You've got me curious. And if there's a ministry official mucking about with ancient magic without understanding it, well, that's just asking for trouble, isn't it?" She tapped the parchment. "I've been doing some digging into ministry protocols for hazardous creature containment. Most of it is standard stunning spells and binding enchantments. But there are a few obscure references to mana suppression techniques, especially for creatures with a deep magical core. It's highly restricted, incredibly risky, and frankly, dark arts adjacent. The idea is to temporarily shut down a creature's inherent magic, making it docile." Arthur's eyes widened. "Mana suppression? Could that be it? Instead of just binding him, Grimshaw's trying to drain him. It would explain the erratic behavior," Lyra mused, her pragmatic mind already piecing it together. Imagine having your magic constantly pulled from you, like a never-ending Dementor's kiss for your core. Kong would be disoriented, panicked, lashing out because he can't understand what's happening. A cold not formed in Arthur's stomach. We have to find out. We have to see what Grimshaw's doing. Lyra sighed, but there was a flicker of determination in her gaze. Right. I knew this would be a late night. Grab your cloak, Penhaligon. And bring that creature sense of yours. We'll need it. The Forbidden Forest, a place of both wonder and dread, seemed particularly ominous that night. The moon, a sliver of silver, barely pierced the thick canopy of ancient trees. Arthur and Lyra moved stealthily, Lyra casting a quiet muffliato charm around them and Arthur relying on his acute senses, every rustle of leaves, every distant hoot, amplified in the silence. He's usually around here, Arthur whispered, gesturing towards the jagged, broken remnants of what was once the Whomping Willow's traditional spot. Now it was a wide clearing dominated by the gnarled roots and towering trunk of a truly colossal, ancient oak, Kong's primary domain. The ground was scarred, deep gouges testifying to Kong's immense power. Keep your wits about you, Arthur, Lyra warned, her wand held ready. If Grimshaw's traps are meant for something as powerful as Kong, they're not going to be simple tripping hazards. As they drew closer, Arthur felt it, a discordant hum in the air, a subtle wrongness that grated on his very being. It was like a beautiful song played off-key, a natural rhythm disrupted. He saw Lyra's eyes narrow, her gaze sweeping the clearing. There, she whispered, pointing with her wand. Near that ancient root system, just past the moss-covered rocks. Arthur squinted, at first seeing nothing but shadows and gnarled wood. Then, as his gaze sharpened, he noticed it, a faint, almost invisible shimmer in the air, like heat haze over a distant road, but without the heat. It pulsed rhythmically, a barely perceptible thrum. What is it? He breathed. Lyra took a cautious step forward, her wand tip glowing with a low revealio charm. The shimmer intensified, revealing intricate patterns of faint, glowing lines etched into the forest floor, spreading outwards from several key points. They were runes, but unlike any Arthur had ever seen. They pulsed with an oppressive, draining energy. Mana siphons, Lyra stated, her voice tight with professional horror. Highly advanced, incredibly insidious. They're designed to subtly drain magical energy from a potent source without a direct magical link. It would feel like a constant, low-level magical drain, slowly depleting Kong's core. He wouldn't know what's happening, just that his power is slipping away. Arthur felt a surge of rage. He's torturing him. No wonder Kong's so angry. He's probably constantly in pain, or just profoundly uncomfortable. As if on cue, a low growl rumbled through the clearing, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. Kong. They ducked behind a thicket of thorn bushes, peering through the thorny branches. Kong was there, massive and majestic, yet his movements were unusually sluggish. He sat near the epicenter of the siphons, his brow furrowed in what Arthur could only interpret as deep distress. His fur, usually gleaming with a vibrant, earthy power, seemed duller, less lustrous. His massive hands, which could effortlessly tear through solid rock, trembled slightly. A whine, deep and guttural, escaped Kong's chest. He scraped one enormous hand along the ground where the runes pulsed, as if trying to swat away an invisible pest. His eyes, usually intelligent and piercing, were clouded with confusion and a profound sadness. He wasn't lashing out in anger. He was suffering in silence, trying to understand an unseen enemy. Arthur's heart ached. This wasn't the raging monster Grimshaw painted him to be. This was a creature in agony, a guardian whose strength was being systematically stripped away. He's so weak, Arthur whispered, his voice catching in his throat. Grimshaw's plan isn't to tame him, it's to break him. Lyra clutched his arm, her expression grim. These siphons are too complex for us to dismantle without risking a cascade failure in the ambient magic, potentially harming Kong further. We need to tell Professor Finch. But Arthur wasn't listening. He was watching Kong, whose gaze had now drifted, unfocused, towards the darkest part of the forest, a silent plea hanging in the air. The faint, Oppressive hum of the siphons intensified, and Kong slumped forward, a shiver running through his immense frame. An instinct, primal and overwhelming, surged through Arthur. He had to help him. He had to let Kong know he wasn't alone. "Arthur, no. What are you doing?" Lyra hissed, but it was too late. Arthur pushed himself out from behind the bushes, walking into the clearing. His heart hammered against his ribs, but a strange calm settled over him, driven by pure empathy. He ignored the oppressive hum of the siphons, ignored the sheer scale of the creature before him, ignored the danger. "Kong," he said, his voice soft but clear in the still night. The colossal ape's head snapped up, his clouded eyes focusing on the small, trembling boy in the clearing. A low growl began deep in his chest, but it sounded more like a question than a threat. Arthur raised his hands slowly, palms open, a gesture of peace. He focused, not on words, but on intent. He poured every ounce of his compassion, his understanding, his sorrow for Kong's plight, into a silent stream of thought. "I see you. I understand. You're hurting. It's not your fault. I want to help." It wasn't magic in the traditional sense, no wand, no incantation. It was an outpouring of pure, unadulterated empathy, a connection forged by their shared affinity for the misunderstood. He felt a faint tremor in the air, a response from Kong, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through his very bones. It was a wave of confusion, pain, and a flicker, just a flicker, of weary curiosity. Kong stared at him, his massive head tilted, a silent question in his ancient eyes. The growl subsided, replaced by a soft, mournful rumble. He seemed to recognize something in Arthur, something that transcended the fear and suspicion he held for other humans. Then, slowly, carefully, Kong lifted one massive hand. He didn't swing it, didn't threaten. Instead, he reached out, his enormous fingers brushing lightly against the very edge of one of Grimshaw's pulsing mana siphons, his eyes still fixed on Arthur. As his fingers touched the glowing rune, a surge of energy, darker and colder than anything Arthur had felt before, pulsed outwards from the siphon, causing Kong to wince, withdrawing his hand quickly. But before the pain could cloud his eyes again, Kong met Arthur's gaze, and in that fleeting moment, Arthur saw it. A flash of recognition, a silent plea for help, and a desperate, primordial intelligence that had been hidden by centuries of misunderstanding. And then, as if the effort had exhausted him, Kong slowly, painfully, slumped back, his eyes closing, a single, soft whine escaping his lips. Arthur stood frozen, the silent plea from the ancient guardian echoing in his mind. Kong wasn't just a protector, he was a sentient being, desperately trying to communicate his suffering. And in that brief, harrowing connection, Arthur realized something else. When Kong had touched the siphon, the dark pulse hadn't just caused pain, it had momentarily illuminated something else, something hidden beneath the surface of the forest floor, deep within the ancient roots of Kong's domain. A faint, almost imperceptible shimmer of gold, unlike the draining glow of Grimshaw's traps, had pulsed for a fraction of a second, quickly fading back into concealment. What was it? And could it be the key to everything? The air around Hogwarts had grown thick with an invisible tension, a hum of unease that even the most oblivious first years felt. For Arthur, it was a tangible weight, pressing down on his chest with every breath. He watched Kong from the edge of the forbidden forest, the massive ape a mere shadow of his former self. Grimshaw's relentless efforts had taken a devastating toll. Kong, usually a formidable presence even in repose, now lay slumped against a cluster of ancient oaks, his immense chest rising and falling with an irregular, shallow rhythm. His fur, once a vibrant, healthy ebony, seemed dull, almost matted with invisible pain. His eyes, usually pools of deep intelligence and ancient power, were cloudy, unfocused. The raw kinetic magic that often pulsed around his fists was barely a flicker, a dying ember. Grimshaw had escalated his tactics. The ministry official, emboldened by what he misinterpreted as Kong's submission, had deployed a series of sophisticated magical suppressors disguised as containment units around Kong's immediate vicinity. These arcane devices pulsed with a sickly green light, feeding off Kong's innate magic, slowly draining him, severing his connection to the primordial wards that anchored him to Hogwarts. "He's fading, Arthur," Lyra whispered, her voice tight with concern as they observed from behind a dense thicket of gnarled branches. She clutched a heavy tome, ancient wardcraft of the British Isles, which she'd practically memorized over the past few days. Professor Finch says these suppressors are designed to unravel the deepest magical tethers. They're not just taming him, they're killing him. Arthur felt a visceral pang of agony, as if a piece of his own soul was being torn away. He could feel Kong's distress, a muted symphony of despair and confusion resonating deep within him. It was a dull throb, growing steadily sharper, like a relentless toothache in his magical core. "Grimshaw doesn't care," Arthur ground out, his hands clenching into fists. "He just sees a beast to be broken, a power to be controlled." Just then, Grimshaw himself emerged from a group of ministry aurors, strutting with a self-satisfied smirk. He approached one of the pulsing suppressors, running a gloved hand over its arcane surface. "Excellent work, gentlemen," Grimshaw announced, his voice carrying clearly on the cool morning air. "Subject is weakening considerably. Its magical resistance is plummeting. Soon, we'll have full control. Imagine the applications, a living, breathing guardian, controllable, deployable." He chuckled, a cold, calculating sound. "Dumbledore's antique wards won't know what hit them. This beast will be mine." A cold rage flared in Arthur's chest. Grimshaw's arrogance was nauseating. He looked back at Kong, whose labored breathing now sounded like a death rattle. A single, guttural moan rumbled from the ape's throat, a sound of profound misery that vibrated through the very ground. "We have to do something, Lyra, now," Arthur said, his voice urgent. "He's calling for help. I can feel it." As if in answer, a sudden, blinding flash erupted from Kong. It wasn't a roar, nor a physical attack. It was a pure, unadulterated wave of magic, shimmering with all the colors of a dying rainbow, emanating directly from his chest. It rippled outwards, a silent, desperate cry, a visible pulse of primordial energy that swept over the forbidden forest, through the castle walls, and out into the surrounding lands. The effect was instantaneous and startling. The air crackled. The leaves on the ancient trees around them rustled violently despite the lack of wind. Inside Hogwarts, Arthur imagined, lights would be flickering, portraits would be muttering, and ghosts would be quivering. The suppressors Grimshaw had deployed flared an angry, aggressive green, trying to absorb the magic, but for a moment, they seemed overwhelmed, sputtering. Arthur felt the magical cry pierce him like 1,000 needles, each one conveying a message of profound loss, of a bond being irrevocably broken. But amidst the pain, there was something else, a faint, almost subliminal direction, a desperate plea for recognition. It was as if Kong's very essence was screaming, pointing towards something, anything, that could save him. "What was that?" Lyra gasped, clutching her chest. It felt like the world itself was weeping. "It's his bond, Lyra," Arthur breathed, his eyes wide. "It's severing. He's sending out a last resort. He's showing us. He's telling me." He pressed a hand to his forehead, the image of a shimmering, iridescent stream of magic, like a river of pure starlight, flashing behind his eyes. It was flowing from Kong, not just outwards, but downwards, deep into the earth, directly beneath where Kong now lay. Beneath him, Arthur whispered, his heart hammering. The ancient wards. Professor Finch said they were complex, interwoven. What if the artifact isn't in the wards, but part of them? The heart of them? Lyra's eyes widened. The original wards, before Hogwarts was even built? The ones that anchored Kong in the first place? Professor Finch did mention old runic carvings often concealed the true source of primordial magic. Grimshaw won't stop until Kong is completely drained, Arthur said, his voice laced with desperate urgency. He glanced at the ministry officials, who were now recovering from the magical pulse, their wands raised, looking for the source of the unexpected magic. They'll be on high alert. We need to be fast. We need to go under him. Without another word, Arthur broke cover, sprinting towards Kong. Lyra, after a moment of stunned hesitation, followed, her face a mask of determination. "Arthur, wait." Lyra hissed, but he was already too close to the perimeter of the suppressors. The sickly green light pulsed, making his skin prickle, trying to siphon off his own nascent magic. Kong, seeing Arthur approach, let out another weak moan, but this time, it was different. A flicker of recognition, a spark of hope, ignited in his cloudy eyes. He tried to lift a hand, but it fell back with a heavy thud. Arthur reached Kong, placing a hand on the giant ape's massive forearm. The fur was coarse, but beneath it, he could feel a faint tremor. "I'm here, Kong," he murmured, his voice cracking. "I'm here to help." He looked down, tracing the invisible line of the magical emanation he had seen. It led him directly to the earth beneath Kong's chest. The ground here was unusually rocky, a jumble of ancient, moss-covered stones that seemed out of place. This was the traditional spot of the Whomping Willow, now Kong's domain. "It has to be here," Arthur said, frantically searching. He remembered Professor Finch's lessons on ancient architecture, how founders often incorporated natural ley lines and powerful magical nexus points into their designs. What if the original binding site for Kong wasn't just the land, but a physical anchor? He began to push aside loose rocks, digging with his bare hands, ignoring the pain as sharp edges scraped his skin. Lyra joined him, pulling out her wand. "Point me." "Ancient anchor," she whispered, a thin, golden thread of light shooting from her wand tip and disappearing directly into the rocky earth where Arthur was digging. "You're brilliant, Lyra." Arthur gasped, encouraged. The ground began to give way, revealing a small, dark crevice beneath a particularly large, flat stone. He pulled the stone aside, revealing a small, perfectly square opening, barely wide enough for him to squeeze through. A wave of warm, ancient magic wafted up from the opening, instantly soothing the raw feeling left by Kong's cry. It was different from Kong's kinetic magic. This felt older, more profound, a protective embrace rather than a destructive force. "This is it," Arthur whispered, a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. "I have to go down." "Arthur, no. It could be a trap," Lyra hissed, grabbing his arm. "Grimshaw's men will be on us any second. And we don't know what's down there." "I have to," Arthur insisted, his eyes fixed on the dark opening. "Kong led me here. He's fading, Lyra. I can feel it. If I don't go, he'll be lost. Hogwarts will be lost." He gently pulled his arm free from Lyra's grasp. "Keep watch. If anyone comes, create a diversion. Don't let them get near this opening." Lyra hesitated for only a second, then nodded, her face grim. "Be careful, Arthur. And hurry." Taking a deep breath, Arthur squeezed himself into the narrow opening, his clothes snagging on rough edges. He descended into utter darkness, relying on the faint, pulsating magical warmth that guided him. The passage was short, leading to a small, circular chamber. As his eyes adjusted, a faint, ethereal glow illuminated the space. It wasn't a Lumos charm. It seemed to emanate from the very walls, which were carved with intricate, ancient runes Arthur vaguely recognized from Professor Finch's books, but had never truly understood. They swirled with a soft, inner light, telling a story of binding and guardianship. In the center of the chamber, resting on a pedestal carved from the living rock, was the artifact. It was a sphere about the size of a quaffle, crafted from a material that seemed to be obsidian infused with liquid starlight. Its surface was perfectly smooth, reflecting the runic carvings like 1,000 tiny mirrors. Within its depths, a soft, pulsating golden light throbbed, beating like a slow, deliberate heart. It emanated the same ancient, comforting magic he had felt from the opening, but magnified 1,000-fold. As Arthur stepped closer, the light within the sphere brightened, and a faint hum resonated through the chamber, reverberating in his bones. He reached out a trembling hand, his fingers brushing against the cool, smooth surface. As soon as he touched it, a jolt of pure energy surged through him, not painful, but electrifying. Images flashed through his mind. A vast, primeval forest, a towering ape standing defiant against a magical storm, ancient wizards chanting, intertwining their magic with the land, binding the ape to a sacred purpose. He saw Kong, not as a destructive beast, but as a sentinel, a protector, his heart intertwined with the very foundations of Hogwarts. He saw the shimmering, golden threads of magic extending from the sphere, anchoring Kong to the castle, connecting his vitality to its wards. This was it. The very heart of Kong's bond. The primordial anchor, as Professor Finch had once fleetingly mentioned in a lesson about ancient wardstones. And it was weakening. The golden light within was flickering, struggling against an unseen force, a dark, creeping shadow that threatened to extinguish it entirely. Grimshaw's suppressors weren't just draining Kong, they were slowly strangling this anchor, severing the link. Arthur grasped the sphere, its warmth spreading through his palms, through his arms, into his very core. He felt a profound sense of responsibility, of destiny. He had found it. The key. Now he had to use it. He looked up at the ceiling of the chamber, knowing that directly above him lay Kong, suffering, and above him, the looming threat of Grimshaw. Time was running out. He clutched the primordial anchor to his chest, its golden light now pulsing in sync with his own beating heart. He had to restore Kong's bond. He had to stop Grimshaw. And he had to do it before it was too late. He knew, with an unshakable certainty, that he held the fate of Kong, and perhaps even Hogwarts, in his trembling hands. The entire castle shuddered. Not with the familiar rumble of a stormy night, but with a visceral, tearing sound that echoed deep in Arthur's bones. Kong's magical cry, a wave of raw anguish and desperate power, had ripped through the night, a beacon of the ancient wards failing. He knew it was Grimshaw. He knew the ministry officials' greed had finally broken the ancient tether. Arthur burst out of the deserted corridor, Lyra scrambling to keep pace beside him, Professor Finch a quiet, urgent presence behind them. The hidden passages they'd used, revealed by Finch's whispered instructions, spat them out onto the castle grounds, directly facing the terrifying spectacle. Where the Whomping Willow traditionally stood, a vast crater now smoldered, Kong at its epicenter. The magnificent ape was writhing, a chaotic symphony of raw power and agony. Streams of dark energy, like corrupted blood, pulsed from his massive form, lashing out at invisible constraints. The ancient wards, usually a shimmering, almost imperceptible force, were now visible as jagged, fracturing lines of light that spiderwebbed across the sky above Hogwarts, flickering ominously. Each pulse from Kong seemed to tear at them further, and with every tear, a part of the castle groaned, stones grinding, windows rattling violently. He's breaking apart the very magic that sustains Hogwarts. Lyra gasped, her usual composure fractured by the sight. Grimshaw, he's trying to subdue Kong, but he's destroying everything. Grimshaw was indeed there, a frantic figure amidst a flurry of Auror struggling to contain the chaos. He was screaming orders, a wild glint in his eyes. Around Kong, strange, glowing runes pulsed on the ground, clearly Grimshaw's traps, now feeding off Kong's pain, amplifying the ward disintegration. The air was thick with crackling magic, the smell of ozone, and a faint, metallic tang. Arthur felt a surge of pure, unadulterated fury. This wasn't about control, it was about destruction. Kong wasn't a monster. He was a guardian, agonizingly bound, now being ripped apart. The fear that had always clutched Arthur's stomach loosened its grip, replaced by a searing resolve. He clutched the artifact, a smooth, obsidian orb intricately veined with gold, pulsing faintly in his palm, like a lifeline. He started running. "Arthur, no. It's too dangerous." Lyra cried, but he barely heard her. His gaze was fixed on Kong, on the agony in those intelligent, primal eyes. Grimshaw spotted him. "Penhaligon, get back, you insufferable Hufflepuff. This is a ministry matter. He's too far gone." He raised his wand, a flicker of red light aimed at Arthur. But before the spell could fully form, Kong, sensing Arthur's approach, let out a gut-wrenching roar. A wave of kinetic magic exploded outwards, shattering Grimshaw's half-cast spell and sending him sprawling. It was a protective gesture, even in his delirium. Arthur reached the edge of the crater, the heat from the ruptured wards searing his skin. Kong was slumped, one immense hand trying to claw at the dark magical chains that seemed to materialize from Grimshaw's runes. His chest heaved, a raw, whistling sound. "Kong!" Arthur yelled, his voice cracking, yet ringing with new authority. He lifted the obsidian orb. I have it. I can help you. Grimshaw, scrambling back to his feet, bellowed, Don't you dare interfere, boy. This creature is a menace. I will contain it, for the good of the wizarding world. His face was contorted with a desperate, manic zeal. He knew his plan was falling apart, and Arthur was standing in his way. He raised his wand again, this time aiming directly at the orb in Arthur's hand. Protego. Lyra's voice was sharp, clear, and a shimmering shield erupted between Arthur and Grimshaw, absorbing the incoming spell. She stood defiant, wand still raised, Professor Finch silent, watchful shadow behind her, her own wand now held loosely, ready. You won't touch him, Lyra snarled, her Slytherin pragmatism replaced by fierce loyalty. Arthur knows what he's doing. You're the menace, Grimshaw, trying to break an ancient bond you don't even comprehend. Grimshaw snarled, dividing his attention between Lyra and Arthur, but Arthur ignored them all. He remembered Professor Finch's words, Lyra's research, his own innate connection. Kong wasn't just physical. He was a living conduit of primordial magic. The artifact was a key, a focal point. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the power of the orb seep into him. It felt ancient, earthy, vibrant. He remembered the feeling of Kong's fur against his hand, the depth of sadness in his eyes. He projected all of it, his understanding, his compassion, his desperate hope, towards the suffering guardian. He opened his eyes and pushed the orb forward, extending his hand towards Kong's colossal form. As he did, the golden veins on the obsidian orb began to glow brighter, pulsing in sync with his heartbeat. A low hum emanated from it, growing in intensity. Arthur began to chant, not a formal incantation, but words that came to him from a deep, forgotten place within, words Professor Finch had taught him about the ancient bonds. Ethelgard. Terra Vita. Nexus Cordis. He repeated them, pouring all his will into the sound. The orb pulsed, throwing a beam of pure, golden light towards Kong. It didn't blast him, but rather enveloped him, seeping into his tattered magical aura. As the light made contact, Kong let out a different sound, a deep, resonating hum that vibrated through the very ground. The dark energy tendrils writhing around him began to recoil, dissolving into shimmering motes of light. The glowing, sinister runes Grimshaw had laid around the crater flickered violently, then exploded into harmless dust. Arthur felt a powerful surge, like a river of ancient magic flowing through him, through the orb, into Kong. He wasn't just observing, he was part of it. He felt Kong's pain recede, felt the ancient wards that anchored the school to its guardian, slowly, painstakingly, knitting back together. The fracturing lines in the sky began to mend, solidifying into their invisible, protective membrane. Kong, still groaning, slowly lowered himself, his thrashing subsiding. The golden light intensified, forming a vibrant web around him, connecting him directly to the regenerated wards of Hogwarts. Arthur saw a flicker of recognition, of peace, in Kong's eyes as the last vestiges of Grimshaw's corrosive magic dissipated. The colossal ape slowly lifted one massive hand, bringing it down, not to smash, but to gently touch the ground near Arthur. It was a gesture of profound gratitude, a silent acknowledgement. Arthur felt a warmth spread through him, a feeling of belonging he had never experienced before. Grimshaw, witnessing his grand plan crumble, let out a frustrated roar. No, you meddling fool. I almost had him. I almost harnessed his power. He lunged, wand poised for a desperate, uncontrolled attack. But before he could cast another spell, Kong, now stabilized and rebonded, lifted his immense head. His eyes, no longer clouded by pain, locked onto Grimshaw. With a single, mighty roar that shook the very foundations of the castle, Kong brought his magically imbued fist down, not on Grimshaw himself, but on the ground mere inches from his feet. The kinetic force was immense, sending Grimshaw flying backwards, his wand spinning away, his body slamming into the stone wall of the castle with a sickening thud. He lay there, dazed and defeated, his grandiose ambition shattered by the very power he sought to control. Professor Dumbledore, followed by a flurry of other professors and a few ministry officials who had been kept at bay by the chaos, arrived on the scene, drawn by the sudden calm and the now stable wards. Their eyes widened at the sight of Kong, still glowing faintly, and Arthur, standing resolute, the obsidian orb now a silent, comforting weight in his hand. Dumbledore's gaze settled on Arthur, a profound understanding in his bright blue eyes. "Arthur Penhaligon," he said, his voice soft, yet resonating with authority. "You have averted a disaster of unimaginable proportions. You have shown courage, wisdom, and a profound connection to magic that few possess." He looked from Arthur to Kong, then back again. "The ancient bond is restored, and with it, the soul of Hogwarts." Arthur looked at Kong, then at Lyra, who offered him a proud, relieved smile, and Professor Finch, whose usually stern features were softened by a rare, gentle expression. He felt the weight of the orb, the power within it, and the deep, silent connection to the magnificent guardian before him. He was no longer the timid Hufflepuff, struggling to find his place. He was Arthur, Kong's protector, a bridge between worlds, and he had found his voice. The following days were a whirlwind of investigations, repairs, and hushed conversations. Grimshaw was swiftly apprehended, his dangerous disregard for ancient magic and his attempts to exploit Kong now a matter for the Ministry's harshest tribunals. Hogwarts began to mend, the castle slowly settling back into its familiar rhythms, though a new, profound reverence for Kong now permeated its ancient stones. Arthur, though still a Hufflepuff, walked with a newfound confidence. He no longer felt like an outsider. He had stood against darkness, not with brute force, but with understanding and empathy. And Kong? Kong was still the school's guardian, but now his roars were not just warnings. They were occasionally punctuated by a low, rumbling sound of contentment when Arthur visited, a sound that only Arthur seemed to truly understand. His main goal was achieved, yet Arthur knew this was only the beginning. He understood the profound truth. Kong was not merely a beast, but a living enigma, a deep well of ancient magic and untapped secrets, tethered to Hogwarts in ways no one fully comprehended. As he walked through the restored castle grounds, the obsidian orb now kept safe and close, he felt the subtle hum of the wards, the reassuring presence of Kong in the distance. He had saved the school, but what other dangers lurked? What other mysteries did the ancient guardian hold, and what new challenges would arise in safeguarding such a unique, powerful, and misunderstood being? The wizarding world was vast, and its creatures even vaster. Arthur Penhaligon, protector of Kong, knew his journey had only just begun.